Brazil wasn't just a dystopian satire, it was a cinematic rebellion against the machinery of Hollywood itself. Terry Gilliam's surreal vision turned into a real-world war with studios, censors, and even his own cast. What looked like pure absurdist comedy on screen was born from chaos, betrayal, and dangerous gambles off-screen. Behind the dreamlike visuals lay brutal battles over final cut, actors pushed to breaking points, and a director who risked his career for artistic freedom. Today, we're tearing back the curtain to reveal 20 weird facts about Brazil, secrets that even die-hard cinephiles might not know. And stay tuned because the bonus fact involves a shocking twist Gilliam pulled on studio executives that changed film history forever. Now, let's dive in. 1. The battle for Final Cut Brazil wasn't just a movie. It became a battlefield. Terry Gilliam insisted on creative control, but Universal Studios saw the film as too bleak and unmarketable. What audiences didn't know is that Gilliam and studio chief Sid Sheinberg entered one of the nastiest director versus studio wars in film history. Sheinberg tried to cut the film down from Gilliam's 142-minute version to a love conquers all ending, complete with a saccharine-happy finale. Gilliam refused. He even took out full-page ads in Variety, asking, "Dear Sid Sheinberg, when are you going to release my film Brazil?" It wasn't rebellion in the movie alone, it was rebellion in real life. Gilliam's defiance cost him jobs, but he ultimately preserved his vision. Not X, not compromise, but artistic war. 2. Secret screenings in Los Angeles. When Universal locked the movie away, Gilliam went rogue. He began organizing secret screenings of his cut for critics and film societies around Los Angeles. One of the boldest moments came when Gilliam showed the film to the Los Angeles Film Critics Association without studio permission. The gamble paid off. The critics named Brazil Best Picture of 1985, along with Best Director and Best Screenplay. Imagine that. A movie audiences couldn't even see was crowned champion. Gilliam used this publicity as a weapon, forcing Universal's hand. It wasn't negotiation, it was ambush. This guerrilla tactic embarrassed the studio so badly that they eventually released Gilliam's version in the U.S., though not without cuts. What audiences never realized was that they were watching a movie born from rebellion in projection booths, not boardrooms. 3. Robert De Niro's obsession. Robert De Niro only had a small role as Harry Tuttle, the renegade heating engineer, but his presence shaped the film. De Niro was so fascinated by the script that he asked Gilliam for the lead role of Sam Lowry. Gilliam said no, he had already promised it to Jonathan Pryce. De Niro didn't give up, asking to play any role. Gilliam finally agreed to give him Tuttle, but De Niro showed up to set with 3 different interpretations of the Pryce character, one comedic, one sinister, one realistic. His intensity clashed with Gilliam's freewheeling style. Crew members whispered that De Niro's obsession slowed down production. But the result? Tuttle became one of the most hauntingly memorable parts of the film. Not just a cameo, but a ghostly shadow that lingered long after he vanished. 4. The cast almost mutinied. The dreamlike tone of Brazil didn't come easy. Gilliam's directing style was chaotic, often leaving actors frustrated. Jonathan Pryce, who played Sam Lowry, later admitted he felt abandoned. Terry didn't direct actors, he recalled. He directed the camera. Michael Palin, Gilliam's longtime Monty Python collaborator, watched tensions boil. Scenes ran over schedule, lighting setups dragged on for hours, and Gilliam's perfectionism tested patience. At one point, crew members whispered about walking out, but Gilliam refused to compromise. "You're in my world," he told them. It wasn't actor-driven cinema, it was Gilliam's dictatorship of dreams. And while some resented him, others admitted later that the film's madness wouldn't exist without that chaos. What audiences didn't know was that the laughter on screen was born from exhaustion, rebellion, and near mutiny. 5. Katherine Hellman's painful prosthetics. Katherine Hellman's character, Mrs. Ida Lowry, undergoes grotesque cosmetic surgeries, an absurdist critique of vanity. But the prosthetics were brutal to wear. Makeup artists glued elaborate latex appliances onto her face, pulling her skin into unnatural shapes. The sessions lasted hours, leaving Helmond exhausted before filming even began. Worse, the appliances trapped heat under studio lights, making her physically ill. Gilliam pushed for more extreme looks, and Helmond endured. "I trusted him," she later said, "even when it hurt." The irony? A satire about beauty came at the cost of the actress's own comfort, not just comedy, but suffering disguised as absurdity. Her performance remains iconic, but few realize the physical toll behind those grotesque smiles. 6. The Paperwork Nightmare. Set design. The most surreal villain in Brazil wasn't a person, it was paper. Production designer Norman Garwood built towering sets filled with endless ducts, files, and forms, all to embody bureaucracy gone mad. But here's the kicker. The mountains of paperwork weren't just props. They were real documents scavenged from abandoned offices. Cast and crew found themselves literally buried in reams of paper, making it difficult to move, breathe, or even hear direction. Gilliam encouraged this chaos, saying, "I want it to feel like the walls are closing in." For Jonathan Pryce, it wasn't acting, it was survival. Scenes where he wrestles with piles of forms became method acting by accident. Not set dressing, but a claustrophobic prison of paper that mirrored Gilliam's war with the studio itself. Reality collapsed into satire. 7. Jonathan Pryce's Dangerous Dream. Sequences. Sam Lowry's dream flights in his winged armor look fantastical, but filming them was anything but magical. Pryce was strapped into an elaborate rig suspended high above the stage. The wings were heavy, awkward, and prone to malfunction. During one take, the rig jammed mid-air, leaving Pryce dangling helplessly. The actor later admitted, "It was terrifying, but I trusted Terry." Audiences see a man soaring against oppression. Behind the camera, it was a man risking broken bones for art, not fantasy, but danger disguised as freedom. And every frame of those surreal flights carried the weight of real fear. 8. Michael Palin's darkest role. Known as the nice guy of Monty Python, Michael Palin shocked audiences as Jack Lint, the smiling torturer. But the real shock was how disturbing Palin found the role himself. Gilliam cast him precisely because he was beloved, saying the horror would be magnified by seeing it come from someone so charming. Palin struggled to reconcile his public image with playing a sadist. "I hated it," he admitted years later. "I didn't want to be inside that head." The torture scene, where he interrogates Pryce, was so intense that even seasoned crew members left the set. What audiences didn't know was that Palin, usually the heart of comedy, walked away shaken, not parody, but a chilling reminder of how even the kindest faces can mask brutality. 9. The soundtrack that nearly broke Gilliam. The film's iconic use of Ari Barroso's 1939 song Aquarela do Brasil defined its mood, but getting it wasn't easy. The song, commonly known as Brazil, was trapped in a web of music rights disputes. Universal balked at the cost, insisting Gilliam find something cheaper. But Gilliam refused to compromise, claiming the entire tone of the film depended on that ironic, upbeat melody. He fought tooth and nail until the rights were secured, nearly derailing production. Composer Michael Kamen then wove the theme throughout the score, turning it into both lullaby and nightmare. Not just background music, but the ironic heartbeat of the film. Without that song, Brazil might have been just another dystopia. With it, the movie became unforgettable. 10. The Real Reason. It resonates today. Here's the engagement hook. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because Brazil isn't just a film from 1985. It's prophecy. Gilliam tapped into fears of surveillance, censorship, and bureaucratic collapse long before the digital age made them daily realities. What audiences didn't know then is that the movie's absurdities, endless forms, screens watching your every move, technology breaking down, are closer to our lives now than at any point in history. Critics once dismissed it as too weird or too dark. Today, it feels terrifyingly accurate. That's the real twist. Gilliam wasn't exaggerating, he was warning us. And every absurd laugh hides a chilling truth about the machinery we still live under. Not escapism, but a warning label disguised as comedy. 11. A crew revolt over overtime. Gilliam's relentless pursuit of perfection often pushed the crew into brutal hours. Night shoots bled into mornings, and overtime became the norm. On one infamous week, the production ran nearly 20 hours straight without a proper break. Exhaustion led to mistakes. Props broke, cables snapped, tempers flared. Some crew members threatened to quit unless conditions improved. Gilliam, consumed by his vision, shrugged it off as the price of dreams. Eventually, producers had to step in to restore order. What audiences never saw was the hidden cost. A film about crushing bureaucracy was itself created by crushing work schedules. Not just satire, but suffering built into celluloid. The irony is cruel. Those endless ducts and papers weren't the only things breaking down. The humans behind the camera were, too. 12. The ducks that nearly killed the set. Those iconic snake-like ducks slithering through every room became the visual symbol of Brazil. But behind the scenes, they were a logistical nightmare. The ducts were heavy, unstable, and difficult to secure. During one shoot, a section of duct broke free from the ceiling, crashing inches from Jonathan Pryce's head. Crew scrambled, reinforcing the structures with hidden supports. Gilliam, however, loved the chaos, saying, "The ducts should feel like they could crush you." For the actors, it wasn't metaphor. It was genuine fear. 13. Universal's secret. Love conquers all. Cut when Universal executives decided Gilliam's version was too depressing. They created their own 94-minute edit, nicknamed the Love Conquers All version. This cut chopped out entire dream sequences, streamlined the plot, and ended with Sam Lowry and Jill escaping happily. To the studio, it was safer and more marketable. To Gilliam, it was betrayal. The contrast between the two cuts is staggering, one bleakly poetic, the other hollow and saccharine. For years, unsuspecting TV audiences were shown this butchered version, not realizing they weren't seeing Gilliam's film at all. Not art, but a sanitized product. Only when Criterion released the final cut years later did fans finally witness the full vision. What looked like absurd fantasy on screen was, behind the scenes, a brutal tug-of-war over truth itself. 14. The editing room became a war zone. Few films have seen an editing process as contentious as Brazil. Gilliam and editor Julian Doyle fought bitterly with studio representatives who demanded cuts. Memo after memo arrived from Universal execs with suggestions, which were really orders. At one point, Sheinberg himself attended editing sessions, insisting on rearranging scenes. Gilliam refused, locking himself in the editing room for days. Doyle later described it as a siege. The stress was so intense that tempers exploded, reels were hidden, and assistants were sworn to secrecy. The irony? A movie about totalitarian control was itself created under totalitarian conditions. Every frame audiences see today is the product of trench warfare in a cutting room. Not collaboration, but combat with scissors and celluloid. 15. The critics became Gilliam soldiers. When Gilliam couldn't win against the studio machine, he turned to critics as his unlikely allies. After those secret screenings, critics like LA Times' Sheila Benson and the LA Film Critics Association championed the film publicly. They praised it as one of the boldest visions of the decade. These glowing reviews spread like wildfire, embarrassing Universal and fueling public demand. Gilliam didn't just make a movie, he staged a media insurgency. Critics weren't passive observers. They became weapons in his rebellion, pressuring the studio with every headline. Not just reviews, but artillery in an artistic war. What audiences didn't know was that every rave they read wasn't just praise. It was ammunition fired directly at Hollywood's corporate fortress. 16. The dream sequences drained the budget. Gilliam's surreal dreamscapes, Sam flying, monsters attacking, towers collapsing, weren't cheap illusions. They devoured nearly a third of the budget. Practical effects teams built massive miniatures, rigged complex wire systems, and shot slow-motion sequences that demanded hours of setup for just seconds of footage. Universal executives fumed at the ballooning costs, calling the dream scenes indulgent. But Gilliam refused to cut them, insisting they were the soul of the film. Crew members recalled long nights building elaborate sets only to tear them down the next day. What audiences didn't realize is that those fantastical flights of imagination came with real financial freefall, not extravagance, but necessity. Without those dreams, Brazil wouldn't haunt like it does. Every surreal frame cost sweat, tears, and nearly the movie itself. 17. Jonathan Pryce. Almost lost the role. Sam Lowry wasn't always destined for Jonathan Pryce. Before Gilliam cast him, the studio pushed hard for bigger names. Tom Cruise, Jeff Bridges, even Al Pacino were floated. Gilliam resisted, saying he needed a face that belonged to the system, not a star who'd break it. Pryce, a respected stage actor but little known in Hollywood, fit perfectly. But Universal worried he wasn't bankable. Gilliam fought tooth and nail, threatening to walk if Pryce wasn't approved. Pryce later admitted he felt immense pressure, knowing he was carrying a film the studio didn't believe in. The irony? Today, Pryce's understated, haunted performance is considered career-defining, not compromise, but conviction. Gilliam risked losing his film to keep his lead. And in the end, that gamble gave Brazil its soul. 18. The Ministry of Information was a real office. The sprawling bureaucratic nightmare of the ministry wasn't filmed on Hollywood stages. Gilliam scouted and shot in abandoned British industrial buildings, converting them into cavernous offices filled with endless desks and typewriters. The eerie authenticity unsettled the cast. Extras playing clerks were given real, meaningless tasks, stamping papers, filing documents, for hours at a time, just to build the right atmosphere of monotony. Some extras complained they felt like they were actually working in an office, not acting in a movie. Gilliam grinned. That's the point. Not just set design, but psychological immersion. The ministry wasn't a fantasy. It was a mirror of real bureaucratic oppression. What audiences didn't know, those endless desks weren't props. They were a lived experience of boredom and soul-crushing repetition for everyone trapped inside. 19. Gilliam's Publicity. Stunts shocked Hollywood. Terry Gilliam didn't just fight in the editing room, he waged war in the press. Beyond his legendary Dear Sid Sheinberg ad, he even smuggled 35mm reels into private critics' screenings, directly defying Universal's ban. Studio executives were furious, accusing him of sabotaging their authority. But Gilliam's brazen defiance made him a folk hero among directors who long feared studio interference. The gamble nearly destroyed his career. Hollywood labeled him difficult, and some producers swore never to work with him. Yet the stunt worked. By weaponizing publicity, Gilliam turned Brazil into a cause, not just a film. Not marketing, but mutiny. What audiences didn't know was that every headline wasn't hype. It was Gilliam's sword, striking at the corporate giants trying to bury his dream. 20. The ending that broke audiences. The most devastating twist of Brazil is Sam Lowry's imagined escape, shattered when the film reveals he's still strapped in the torture chair, broken and insane. Gilliam insisted on this bleak ending even as Universal fought to replace it. Test audiences were stunned into silence. Some walked out, furious. Others sat frozen, unable to process the gut punch. Gilliam refused to soften the blow, saying, "The truth is not always comforting. Not happy ever after, but annihilation of hope." The ending didn't just unsettle audiences, it cemented the film's legacy as one of the boldest anti-Hollywood finales ever. What audiences didn't know. Behind that single devastating cut was a director who chose to sacrifice commercial success for artistic honesty, And in that moment, cinema itself changed. Bonus fact, the guerrilla Oscar campaign. The final twist. Gilliam's war didn't end with release, it went all the way to the Academy Awards. When Universal dragged its feet, Gilliam secretly screened Brazil for Academy voters, bypassing studio marketing entirely. The result? Despite the sabotage, the film scored Oscar nominations for Best Screenplay and Best Art Direction. It didn't win, but the nominations were a slap in the face to Universal's attempt to bury it. Not just survival, but victory. Gilliam proved a director could outwit the system itself. And in doing so, he carved Brazil into film history, not as a commercial triumph, but as an act of cinematic rebellion that still echoes today.